Hi, I'm Natalie. I'm in my late 20s, and until recently, I thought I had a pretty stable life. Nothing extraordinary, just solid. I had a decent job, a little bit of savings, and I was finally ready to take a big step, buying my first home. It wasn't going to be a mansion, just a small condo, something I could truly call my own, a place to build a future. I'd spent years working hard, saving diligently, watching friends buy places while I waited, making sure all my ducks were in a row financially. My credit score was good. I had a solid down payment saved up, and I felt ready. More than ready. I felt hopeful. Applying for the mortgage felt like the culmination of all that effort. Filling out the paperwork, gathering bank statements, tax returns, it was tedious, sure, but it was also exciting. This was it. This was my chance to finally have something tangible, something that belonged to me and only me. I pictured myself painting the walls, choosing furniture, having a quiet place where I could just be. It represented independence, security, all the things I craved after years of feeling a little rootless, I guess. I submitted the application, feeling a nervous flutter of anticipation. I expected the usual back and forth, maybe a few questions, but I was confident. I'd done everything right. My financial advisor had reviewed everything and given me the thumbs up. There was no reason for anything to go wrong. Then the call came. It wasn't the quick approval I'd optimistically hoped for. It wasn't even a request for more information. It was polite, professional, and utterly devastating. The loan officer explained, with a carefully neutral tone, that my application had been denied. I remember feeling a cold wave wash over me, my heart starting to pound. Denied? How? Why? When she mentioned issues with my credit report, specifically a significant outstanding debt I didn't recognize, my world tilted. A debt? What debt? I hadn't taken out any major loans, certainly nothing that would derail a mortgage application. My mind raced, trying to think of anything I might have forgotten, any old student loan or credit card I'd misplaced. Nothing. There was absolutely nothing. The loan officer gave me the name of the creditor and the amount. The number was staggering. It was for an amount I couldn't even comprehend needing myself, let alone having borrowed. And the creditor was not a bank or a student loan company I recognized. It felt wrong, deeply wrong. That moment, standing there with the phone pressed against my ear, my dream of a home dissolving, was the beginning of everything changing. It was the first crack in the foundation of my life, a life built on trust and certain assumptions about the people closest to me. I didn't know it then, but that denial wasn't just about a mortgage. It was about uncovering a truth that had been buried for years, a truth that would redefine my family, my past, and my future. It's a story about betrayal, about seeing clearly after years of living in a haze, and about finding the strength to rebuild when everything you thought was solid crumbles. If you've ever felt like someone you loved took advantage of you, or if you've struggled to set boundaries with family, maybe you'll understand. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The world outside the mortgage office seemed to blur as I stepped back onto the street. The sunlight felt too bright, the noise of traffic too loud. Inside, everything was muted, a dull roar in my ears. Denied. A significant outstanding debt. I clutched the rejection letter, my hands trembling slightly. It wasn't possible. My credit was good. I paid my bills on time. I didn't have any large loans. I drove home on autopilot, the image of the condo listing I'd been so excited about flashing in my mind, now tinged with a bitter irony. Once inside my small rented apartment, the quiet pressed in on me. I needed to see that credit report. Now. Pulling it up online, my fingers fumbled on the keyboard. Logging in, navigating the site, every click felt heavy with dread. And there it was. Listed under my name, my social security number, was a loan taken out 5 years ago. The amount was exactly what the loan officer had stated. And the creditor, it wasn't a bank. It was a small, local credit union I'd never had any dealings with. The address listed for the loan application wasn't mine. It was my parents'. A cold knot formed in my stomach. This had to be a mistake. Identity theft? But why that specific credit union? Why use my parents' address? My mind, desperately trying to find a logical explanation that didn't involve the unthinkable, scrambled. Maybe it was a mix-up. Maybe someone with a similar name, but the social security number was mine. There was no denying that. I stared at the screen, the words blurring through unshed tears. 5 years ago. What was happening 5 years ago? I was working my first full-time job, living frugally, trying to save money. 5 years ago, my brother, Kevin, had just finished college and was talking about starting his own business. He needed capital, a lot of capital. He had approached our parents, of course. Kevin was the golden child, the brilliant, ambitious son. Everything he did was celebrated, supported. His ideas were revolutionary, his potential limitless. My sister, Emily, and I were less so. Emily was the creative, sensitive one, often dismissed as too emotional. I was the responsible, practical one, which usually translated to can handle things herself or, more accurately, can be relied upon to fix things. I remembered snippets from back then. Kevin's endless pitches, the anxious discussions around the dinner table about funding, Mom and Dad looking stressed. There was talk of loans, of leveraging assets. I hadn't paid much attention, honestly. It felt like adult business, something separate from my world of entry-level spreadsheets and shared house bills. I trusted my parents implicitly. They were Mom and Dad. They were supposed to protect you. Except, the credit report was undeniable. The loan was in my name. My hands were shaking violently now. I grabbed my phone and called my mom. My finger hovered over her name, a strange reluctance washing over me. This couldn't be real. She wouldn't. She couldn't. She answered cheerfully, asking how my day was. Her voice was warm, normal. It felt like a betrayal in itself, that she could sound so ordinary while my world was collapsing. Mom, my voice was hoarse, unfamiliar even to me. Did you take out a loan in my name? Silence. A long, heavy silence stretched across the phone line. The cheerfulness vanished, replaced by a stillness that was more terrifying than shouting. Finally, she spoke, her voice low, cautious. Natalie, what are you talking about? I gripped the phone tighter. My credit report, Mom. I just pulled it. There's a loan on it from 5 years ago, from the local credit union. It's in my name. But the address is yours. The amount is huge. Did you do this? Another pause. I could hear her breath catching. Then a sigh. Not a sigh of regret, but a sigh that sounded like annoyance, like I was being difficult. Oh, Natalie, she said, her tone shifting, becoming softer, tinged with a practiced weariness. That. Yes, well, we had a situation back then. A situation? My dream of homeownership, possibly my financial future, reduced to a situation? A situation, Mom? You took out a loan for tens of thousands of dollars in my name without telling me. That's not a situation, that's identity theft. Don't be dramatic, Natalie. Her voice hardened slightly. It wasn't like that. We needed the money. Kevin needed it for his business. The banks were being difficult, and your father and our credit wasn't ideal at the time. Yours was perfect. It was just a temporary thing. Temporary? 5 years temporary? And you didn't think to tell me? Not when you took it out, not 5 years ago, not ever? Well, we didn't want to worry you, she said, her voice regaining some of its saccharine quality. We knew you'd understand. It was for the family, Natalie. For Kevin's future. This business was so important. We intended to pay it back, of course. We have been. No, you haven't. I cried, my voice cracking. It's still on my credit report. It just blocked me from getting a mortgage. I was denied, Mom. Denied because of this loan you took out. Oh dear, she said, but there was no real concern in her tone, only a performative distress. Is it really? I'm sure it's just a delay. You can explain it. Tell them it was for family. Tell them it was for family, to a mortgage lender? Did she have any concept of how the world worked? Or did she simply live in a reality where my needs were always secondary to the family's, specifically Kevin's? Mom, you committed fraud, I said, the words feeling heavy and terrible as I spoke them. You used my identity. This isn't a small thing. This is illegal. Her voice sharpened again, losing all pretense of softness. How dare you accuse your mother of something like that? We did what we had to do, for Kevin, for the family. We've done everything for you, kids. Is this the thanks we get? The immediate shift from justification to wounded parent was jarring, a tactic I recognized from years of navigating my mother's emotional landscape. Any challenge to her actions, no matter how egregious, was met with accusations of ingratitude. Thanks? I repeated, my voice rising. Thanks for ruining my credit? Thanks for destroying my chance to buy a home? Thanks for using me without my knowledge or consent? It wasn't like that, she insisted, her voice escalating. It was a sacrifice. We sacrificed to help Kevin. Your father worked tirelessly. And this was just a small thing, Natalie. A temporary loan. We'll pay it off. Just calm down. Don't make a big deal out of this. A small thing? I was practically shouting now, tears streaming down my face. Mom, this is my future you messed with. How can you say it's a small thing? Because it is, in the grand scheme of things, she retorted. Family takes care of family. Kevin needed this. He was starting a business. This was important. Your little condo can wait. There are more important things than your own selfish desires. Selfish desires. Buying a home was a selfish desire. Funding her favorite child's speculative business venture by secretly leveraging mine was taking care of family. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I can't do this right now, I choked out, the conversation spiraling into the familiar pattern of her blaming me for reacting to her actions. I need to figure out what to do. What to do? She scoffed. There's nothing to do, we'll pay it off. Eventually. Just tell the bank it's a family matter. Honestly, Natalie, you always overreact. I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I had to put the phone down before I dropped it. My mother. My own mother. The woman who had tucked me in at night, who had nursed me when I was sick, who I had loved and trusted implicitly, had stolen from me. Not objects, but my future, my financial security, my agency. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't just the money, though that was significant. It was the deceit, the casual way she admitted it. The immediate pivot to making me feel guilty for being upset. The blatant favoritism that elevated Kevin's dreams above my fundamental financial well-being. I sat on my couch, tears blurring my vision, trying to piece together how I hadn't seen this coming. But had I? Hadn't there always been signs? The way Kevin's achievements were celebrated with fanfare, while mine were met with a brief nod. The way his needs, his wants, his problems always seemed to take precedence. If he needed a ride, I canceled plans. If he needed money, Mom and Dad somehow found it, even if it meant asking me to cover things for them temporarily, which often turned into permanently. If he was struggling, the whole family rallied around him. If I was struggling, I was told to be practical or resilient. There was the time I needed help with a security deposit for an apartment. I had saved most of it but was short a few $100s because of an unexpected car repair. I asked my parents if they could lend it to me. They hemmed and hawed, talked about being tight on money, and eventually gave me less than half of what I needed, making it clear it was a big sacrifice. A few weeks later, Kevin mentioned casually that Mom and Dad had bought him a new, top-of-the-line laptop to help with his business ideas. The contrast had stung then, but I'd brushed it off. Kevin needs it for work, I told myself. My need is less important. This was the pattern of my life, minimizing my own needs, maximizing theirs, especially Kevin's. I was the responsible one, the reliable one. The one who didn't make waves, who helped out, who could be counted on. And because I could be counted on, I was taken for granted. Because I didn't make waves, they felt free to walk all over me. The shock wore off, slowly replaced by a simmering anger. And beneath the anger, a profound sadness. This wasn't just a financial problem, it was a relational one. A fundamental breach of trust with the people who were supposed to be my safe harbor. I called my sister, Emily. Emily and I had always been closer, sharing notes on navigating our parents' complex dynamics. Em, I said, my voice still shaky. Something awful has happened. I explained the mortgage denial, the credit report, the loan in my name, and the conversation with Mom. There was silence on Emily's end, but a different kind of silence than Mom's. It was a stunned, sympathetic, quiet. "Oh my God, Nat," she finally whispered. "Number they didn't." "They did, Em. Mom just admitted it. She said it was for Kevin's business, 5 years ago." Emily let out a shaky breath. Kevin's business, the first one? The one that failed 6 months later? That detail hadn't even registered in my shock. The loan, the one that had derailed my life, hadn't even gone towards a successful venture. It had funded a failure, and I was left holding the debt. "She said they'd been paying it back," I said, recounting Mom's words. "But they haven't. The balance is still almost the full amount." "Of course they haven't," Emily said flatly. "They never paid anything back. Remember the money Dad borrowed from your savings for that investment opportunity? Did you ever see that again?" She was right. Years ago, when I was in college, my dad had needed money for something vague. He called an investment. He'd promised to pay it back with interest. I'd given him most of my meager savings from my part-time job. I never saw a cent of it again. When I gently reminded him once, he'd gotten defensive, saying he'd provided for me my whole life. Wasn't I being a bit stingy? I dropped it. "It's always been like this, Nat," Emily continued, her voice heavy. "With Kevin, he gets everything. We get whatever's left over or asked to sacrifice. Remember when I wanted to go to that art program overseas? They said they couldn't afford it, not a penny. But they bought Kevin that ridiculously expensive car when he graduated to help him get to meetings. We talked for a long time, swapping stories, validating each other's experiences. It was cathartic, but also incredibly sad. To realize the pattern of favoritism and exploitation wasn't a figment of our imaginations, but a stark, undeniable reality. Emily was furious on my behalf, her anger echoing my own. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I have to do something. I can't just let this stand. My credit is ruined. I can't get a mortgage. And they just expect me to accept it?" "Don't," Emily said firmly. "Don't let them do this to you. This is different, Nat. This isn't just forgetting to pay you back a small amount. This is serious. This is illegal." Knowing Emily saw the gravity of it helped. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. This was wrong. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and research. I talked to a consumer credit counseling service. I talked to a lawyer specializing in fraud. The consensus was clear: my mother had committed fraud. To clear my name, I would likely need to report it as identity theft. This meant reporting my own mother to the authorities. The thought made me physically ill. I also spoke to the credit union. They confirmed the loan details, the signature, the address. They were sympathetic, but firm. The loan was in my name, and I was responsible for it unless I could prove it was fraudulent. Proving fraud usually involved filing a police report. My father called. I hadn't spoken to him since the conversation with Mom. He was quieter than usual, his tone a mix of awkwardness and veiled disapproval. "Natalie," he started, "your mother is very upset." Of course. The focus was already on her feelings, not the devastating impact of her actions. "Dad, she took out a loan in my name without telling me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She committed fraud. She ruined my credit, and I can't buy a home." "Yes, well," we explained, he said. It was for Kevin. It was a necessity at the time. A necessity? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Using my identity was a necessity? Why didn't you ask me? Why didn't you explain the situation? I would have helped if I could, in a way that didn't involve breaking the law and destroying my finances. You were young, he said dismissively. You wouldn't have understood the complexities. Young? I was 22, a functioning adult. I understood my name, Dad, and my social security number, and I understand that using them without my permission is wrong. Natalie, we raised you, he said, his voice growing firmer, taking on that familiar parental authority that was meant to shut down dissent. We provided for you. We clothed you, fed you, put a roof over your head. Can't you do this one thing for your family? This one thing. Sacrificing my financial future was this one thing. The calculation was stark. My life, my future, was worth less than their desire to bankroll Kevin's unstable venture without impacting their own credit or assets. You want me to take responsibility for a loan you illegally took out? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. We will pay it back, he insisted, echoing Mom. It just takes time. Things have been tight. Tight? They lived comfortably. They took vacations. Kevin had started another business, one that also seemed to be constantly needing infusions of cash that I suspected was coming from somewhere, maybe still from this loan in my name, or maybe new, equally suspect sources. Dad, I said, my voice breaking. I was denied a mortgage. I don't have time. I need this off my credit now. You're putting a house before your family? He asked, disappointment heavy in his voice. After everything we've done for you? The gaslighting was relentless. Every attempt to assert the wrongness of their actions was met with accusations of ingratitude or selfishness. It twisted my stomach. For years I had bent over backward for them, for Kevin, for Emily. I was the reliable one, the one who helped out without complaint. I drove them to appointments, helped them with errands, listened to their problems for hours, helped Mom with her computer, helped Dad with bills, gave Kevin rides, proofread his business plans, the first one, the second one, the third one, chipped in for family dinners I couldn't really afford, bought thoughtful gifts. I had given my time, my energy, my emotional labor, and now, unknowingly, my financial security. And this was the response when I finally needed something from them, or rather, needed them to fix something they had broken. Dad, this isn't about a house, I said, trying to hold on to my composure. This is about trust. This is about what you did to me. This is about the fact that you used me. We used what was available. He snapped, losing patience. You had perfect credit. It was the simplest solution. Stop being so dramatic, Natalie. Your mother is crying. You're upsetting her. And there it was again. My feelings, my very valid distress, were secondary to my mother's manufactured upset. The message was clear. Silence yourself to protect her feelings, even when she had caused immense harm. I can't talk about this anymore right now, I said, tears welling up again. I need time to figure things out. Well, think about your mother, he said before hanging up. The isolation was profound. My parents were united against me, seeing me as the unreasonable child disrupting their carefully constructed reality. Kevin, when I finally managed to speak to him, he initially dodged my calls, was completely dismissive. Oh yeah, that loan, he said, as if remembering a minor inconvenience. Mom and Dad mentioned something about it. Why's that a big deal? I explained, voice tight with frustration, about the mortgage, the credit report, the fraud. Huh, he said, sounding bored. Seems like a lot of drama over nothing. Can't Mom and Dad just sort it out? They took it out in my name, Kevin. It's my debt. My credit is ruined. Yeah, but it was for my business, Nat, he said, as if that explained everything. It was important. You know, building something. It's not like it was for, what, a car or something frivolous. His sense of entitlement was staggering. He genuinely seemed to believe that because the money he benefited from went towards his ambitions, it was a noble cause that justified any means, including financially crippling his sister without her knowledge. There was no apology, no empathy, just a shrug and an expectation that I would absorb the damage. It failed, Kevin, I said, the bitterness sharp in my voice. The business failed, and I'm stuck with the debt. Yeah, well, not everything works out, he said, airy and unconcerned. Gotta take risks, you know. Entrepreneurship isn't for the faint of heart. It wasn't his heart that was faint. It was his conscience that was absent. And mine, that was broken. Only Emily was in my corner. She offered support, a listening ear, and reinforced that I wasn't crazy, they were wrong. She couldn't offer financial or legal help, but her emotional validation was invaluable. The weight of it all was crushing. Sleep offered little respite. I would lie awake, replaying conversations, feeling the hot flush of anger, the cold dread of my financial situation, and the deep ache of realizing the people I loved most had betrayed me so profoundly. I felt like an object, a tool used and discarded. My feelings, my future, didn't matter. I considered the options. If I reported it, I could potentially clear my name, but it would mean pressing charges against my mother. She could face legal consequences. Our family would be shattered publicly. The thought of that felt monumental, terrifying. But what was the alternative? Live with this debt? Let my credit be ruined? Never be able to buy a home? Allow them to get away with it, implicitly telling them their actions were acceptable. The resentment would eat me alive. I would forever be tethered to their deceit, paying the price for their choices and their favoritism. I started seeing a therapist. I desperately needed a neutral space to process the complex layers of pain, anger, and confusion. Talking about my childhood, the subtle and not so subtle ways Kevin was favored, how I learned to be the easy child, the helpful child, the one who didn't ask for much, began to illuminate the path that led me here. My ingrained people-pleasing, my fear of conflict, my deep-seated need for their approval, these were the vulnerabilities they had, perhaps unconsciously, exploited. They knew I wouldn't rock the boat. They knew I would likely suffer in silence. My therapist helped me see that their behavior wasn't just a mistake, it was a pattern. It was a symptom of a dysfunctional family system where one child was idolized and the others were expected to support that idolatry, regardless of the personal cost. She helped me understand that my mother's tears and my father's disappointment were manipulative tactics to maintain control and avoid accountability. She also helped me see that protecting myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. It wasn't a betrayal of my family, it was an act of self-preservation. The family that would do this to me wasn't a healthy unit deserving of unconditional loyalty, it was a toxic system that was harming me. The idea of reporting my mother still felt like stepping off a cliff. But the alternative, continuing to enable their behavior, sacrificing my future for their convenience and Kevin's perceived needs, felt like a slow, painful death of my spirit. I made the decision. I would protect myself. I didn't tell my parents or Kevin what I was doing. I gathered all the documentation, the credit report, the mortgage denial letter, information about the loan, correspondence from the credit union. I contacted the police department. Filing the report was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Sitting there, recounting the story to a police officer, admitting that my own mother had committed fraud against me, felt surreal, shameful. But as I spoke, a quiet resolve settled over me. I was doing the right thing, not just for my credit, but for me, for the little girl who was always overlooked, for the young woman who was taken advantage of. I was finally standing up for myself. The police contacted my parents. The fallout was immediate and explosive. My phone rang off the hook with enraged calls from Mom and Dad. "How could you?" Mom shrieked, her voice a raw, ugly sound. "Reporting your own mother? What kind of monster are you?" "You left me no choice, Mom," I said, my voice trembling but holding firm. "You committed fraud. You wouldn't acknowledge it, You wouldn't fix it. You just expected me to deal with it. What else was I supposed to do? You were supposed to be understanding, she wailed. You were supposed to be family. We did this for Kevin. It was necessary. It was never necessary to break the law and hurt me, I said, the words coming out stronger than I expected. There were other ways. You could have asked for my help honestly. You could have found other financing. You chose to use me, and you chose not to tell me. We've done everything for you, Dad's voice boomed from the background. And this is how you repay us. Shame on you, Natalie. Repay you? I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping me. By letting you walk all over me? By sacrificing my future? I don't owe you this, Dad. You owed me honesty and protection, and you gave me deceit and damage. The conversation devolved into shouting, accusations, and tears, hers, not mine this time. I refused to back down. For the first time, I didn't try to soothe her, didn't apologize for my existence or my needs. I simply stated the facts and held my ground. It was terrifying, but also incredibly empowering. I ended the call, knowing that a line had been crossed, a boundary built. This wasn't something we could sweep under the rug. This was permanent. The legal process was slow and emotionally draining. There were investigations, statements, mediating with the credit union. My parents initially tried to deny everything to the police, then claimed it was a misunderstanding, then blamed me for being ungrateful. But the evidence was clear. My signature had been forged, the loan taken out without my knowledge. The credit union, once they had the police report, was more willing to work with me. They investigated internally and agreed that the loan was fraudulently obtained. There was a process to get it removed from my credit report. It wasn't instantaneous, taking several months, but eventually, it was done. The debt was assigned back to the person who had actually benefited from it and signed the papers using my name, my mother. The emotional cost was immense. My relationship with my parents and Kevin was effectively severed. They saw me as the villain, the child who had abandoned her family, who had put them through legal trouble. They never apologized, not genuinely. Mom would occasionally send a text saying, "Hope you're happy now," or Dad would leave a voicemail saying, "We miss you, but we can't understand why you did this to us." There was never any acknowledgement of the harm they had caused, only resentment that I had refused to accept it. Emily remained a lifeline. She understood. She validated my pain and my decisions. She, too, began to set firmer boundaries with our parents, having seen firsthand the consequences of their entitled behavior. This crisis, while tearing apart my relationship with half my family, strengthened my bond with my sister. There were moments of intense grief. Grief for the family I thought I had, for the trust that was broken beyond repair, grief for the childhood where subtle messages of my lesser value had been planted, grief for the dreams that had been delayed or damaged. But slowly, gradually, the grief began to be replaced by something else, a sense of peace, a quiet confidence. I had faced one of my biggest fears, confronting my parents, standing up for myself against their manipulation and guilt, and I had survived. More than survived, I had prevailed. My credit was restored. The fraudulent loan was gone. The path to buying a home was open again. But more importantly, the path to building a life on my terms was open. A life where my worth wasn't dependent on my usefulness to others, where my needs weren't secondary, where my boundaries were firm and respected. The financial aspect of the betrayal was concrete and fixable. The emotional and relational damage was more complex, maybe never fully healed. But by confronting it, by refusing to accept it, I had taken back my power. I learned that family isn't just a label, it's a behavior. And if that behavior is toxic, if it's damaging, you have the right to protect yourself, even if it means stepping away. It was a hard lesson, learned through tears, anger, and pain. But it was a necessary one. It stripped away the illusions and showed me the truth, and while the truth hurt, it also set me free. Free from the obligation to be their easy child, free from the need for their approval, free to build a life that was authentically mine. I eventually applied for another mortgage, and this time, I was approved. Buying that condo wasn't just a financial transaction, it was a symbol. A symbol of my independence, my resilience, my reclaimed future. It was a home I built on a foundation of my own making, not on the shaky ground of someone else's deceit. The silence from my parents and Kevin was sometimes loud, a constant reminder of the rift. But in that silence, I found my own voice. I learned to trust my own judgment, my own feelings. I built a support system of friends and my sister who saw and valued me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. The scars are there, reminders of the betrayal, but they are also reminders of my strength. I went through something terrible, something that could have destroyed me, and I came out on the other side, whole and stronger. I am Natalie, and I am free. So, that's my story. It's not easy to share something so personal, something that involves such deep betrayal from the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. But I wanted to share it because I know I'm not alone. Many of us have complex, sometimes painful, relationships with our families. We've felt overlooked, taken advantage of, or struggled with setting boundaries, especially with parents or siblings. Learning to protect yourself, to say no, to prioritize your own well-being, it's incredibly difficult. Especially when you've been conditioned to be a people pleaser or the responsible one. There's so much guilt, so much fear of rejection or causing upset. But my experience taught me that true love and healthy relationships don't require you to sacrifice your own worth or your future. If you're going through something similar, please know that your feelings are valid. You have the right to be angry, hurt, and to protect yourself. You are not selfish for wanting a safe and secure future, for wanting to be treated with honesty and respect. Your worth is not measured by how much you sacrifice for others. It's a long process of healing and rebuilding, but it is possible. Setting boundaries, even difficult ones, is an act of self-love. Finding your voice, even when it shakes, is empowering. And building a life that is truly yours, free from the weight of past burdens and expectations, is the most rewarding thing you can do. Thank you for listening. If any part of this resonated with you, or if you have your own experiences with family dynamics or boundaries, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Sharing our stories helps us all feel less alone. If you found this story helpful or impactful, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel for more stories of resilience and transformation. Remember, you are not alone, and you deserve to live a life where you are valued and respected.